Good morning. Welcome to another episode of The Angry Astronaut. So some of you may have clicked on this video and let out a long, frustrated sigh. Here he goes about European spaceflight again. Why is this guy so obsessed with this stuff? I mean, he could talk about South Korea. They actually got to orbit recently. All of these other countries have developing space programs too, but he's just talking about Europe. Well, that's because things are happening here in Europe that are very, very different than anything happening in the rest of the world as far as developing spaceflight is concerned, or indeed things that are happening in the United States. And this became very apparent just recently when the ESA ministerials came to a conclusion and the ESA budget was released. And since we're going to be talking about numbers here for a while, let's also talk about subscriber numbers. We are less than 100 subscribers away from 90,000. And then at that point, it's downhill all the way to 100K. Please subscribe. And if you have already done so, please get your friends and family members to subscribe. Let's move on. So what are the ESA ministerials? Well, they're essentially a discussion amongst all of the member nations of the European Space Agency to determine what the budget is going to be for ESA for the next 3 years. One would expect under these circumstances, with inflation skyrocketing, the war in Ukraine, all of these other factors, that the budget would stay roughly the same or might even drop a bit. But instead, ESA has increased its budget dramatically. Now, I'm going to get all the negative stuff out of the way right off the bat. Europe is still not spending enough on space, not per capita, still substantially less than the United States, not as much in terms of the size of their economy either. If they spent a proportional amount, their budget would be more along the lines of $20 billion a year, and it's nowhere near that. But nevertheless, it's a really good sign to see the budget going up radically, even more than the current rate of inflation. Over the course of describing the budget to you and what ESA is going to be spending their money on, what the projects are, etc., I'm also going to be sharing with you a convention, details from a convention that I recently went to that is exclusively devoted to the development of spaceflight here in the UK, because it gives a really good impression of just how dedicated the United Kingdom is to furthering spaceflight, just how fast this industry is taking off, so to speak, in this country, and how there's really, as you will hear in one of my interviews, no going back at this point. There have been many times in the history of European spaceflight and the European space industry where things have gone back, where things have been rolled back, ambitious plans canceled, etc. Not this time, and I'm going to show you why. Oh yeah, and got one other thing to tell you. You know how there's a lot of thought that Brexit has kind of pulled Britain out of the whole ESA situation? Well, that's not the case. Even though Britain may have pulled out of the EU, they have not pulled out of ESA. What does that mean? Well, guys, unfortunately, you're still spending tax money on Ariane 6. But there's some good news as well. Guys, we are here unexpectedly with the MTC to get an idea of what's going on here. This convention I had an opportunity to attend. Would you be so kind as to introduce yourself to the viewers?
Sure, yeah. So my name's Anne and I'm the Space Sector Development Manager here at the MTC. The Manufacturing Technology Centre, and I've been privileged enough to organise this conference, obviously with a large team behind me, but yeah, it's been something that's been coming since 2019 when we did our inaugural Made for Space. COVID got in the way a little bit, so this is the first time we've managed to deliver the conference again, and it's been fantastic. What a great couple of days.
Yeah, I've been very impressed with everything I've seen up to this point, even though I've only been here for a few hours compared to the entire length of the convention. So tell me, I mean, obviously a lot of things are happening in the UK in regards to spaceflight, in Cornwall, in Saxford, in regards to all the satellite manufacturers you have, Goonhilly, the list goes on and on.
It does.
So what is your, involvement in this? What are you trying to accomplish at this convention to make UK spaceflight take off, so to speak?
Okay, so yeah, we've got a little bit of serendipity going on. Timing is everything, and perhaps we didn't know that when we chose the dates in November. So you're quite right, Cornwall's a big focus in the UK space sector at the moment. This will be the horizontal launch we've all been dying to see. I was actually there a couple of weeks ago. Delighted to be offered an opportunity to have a look around, see the rocket underneath Cosmic Girl, even see inside the fairings, inside the clean room as things were being loaded up. I mean, what an exciting time for the sector, right? To have this, we're on the cusp. We feel like we're on the cusp of something really exciting. Now, that's not to say that we haven't been doing this a very long time successfully in the UK. And of course, I think Scotland's been doing a fantastic job in terms of the stats around the number of satellites manufactured that are actually in space. We're home to Airbus, SSTL as well, Thales is too. So we've been manufacturing a long time, but as you said, there's something happening right now which means that we could be seeing a real uplift in the way that we start to launch, and that means an uplift in the number of goods we need to manufacture for space. And that's where the MTC comes in. We're part of the High Value Manufacturing Catapult. So there are 7 centres across the UK under that umbrella. And we're the Manufacturing Technology Centre. So we like to introduce technologies into any manufacturing company to make them improve their processes, optimise things, make things more efficient. It's all about what you produce at the end of that. And we thought, well, space is a huge opportunity, right? So I've been working in the sector for maybe 6 years now. The MTC's been coalescing around this, I would say, for probably 3 years, certainly before the last Made for Space conference. And we feel that we've really now got to a point where we've got tangible things that we could offer the sector to help them do what's needed next if we're really going to get those launches up and running and regular. I mean, the numbers I'm hearing are fantastic. So we're going to have to launch something, right? It's going to have to be made. Let's make it in the UK.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's something, a notion that I have communicated a lot on my channel is that it only makes sense for, launch to start, becoming a reality in more places. I mean, the fact that Western Europe has never done an orbital launch in its history is astonishing to many people. And most people that I've interviewed on the street here in the UK have no idea that any of this is even happening. So overall, Britain is making a substantial contribution to this ESA budget. The total budget is €16,923,000,000, and the UK is contributing €1.892 billion of that, or about 11.2%. Now that may not sound like a hell of a lot, but compared to most countries in ESA, it really is substantial. Austria, for example, is $229 million, or only 1.4%. Belgium's actually pretty big, $946 million, but still not as much as the UK. The Czech Republic, $146 million. Denmark, $136 million. Estonia, $26 million. Finland, $148 million. And by the way, all of these numbers are substantially larger than what these countries committed to the last time around. France is 3.2 billion euros. Germany, 3.5 billion euros, and that represents an increase of nearly 200 million euros for Germany and an incredible €500 million for France. They are getting extremely serious about this budgeting. And by the way, a surprise budget came from Italy, over 3 billion euros coming from Italy, and that's probably because ESA is contributing a considerable amount of its budget towards the success of the Vega C rocket, which is mostly manufactured in Italy. But, as I've been asking recently, is there any sort of resistance or inertia going on in the UK because people were making a lot of money doing things the old-fashioned way, that is to say, manufacturing satellites in Britain and shipping them to the US? So sometimes I ask the tough questions. You may not be able to answer this.
Yeah, I'll try.
Satellite manufacturing has been a huge British industry for a very long period of time. However, the business of launching these satellites has been a very big industry in the United States for a very long time. So there are, I think you would admit, people who are making a lot of money launching British satellites in the U.S.
Absolutely.
And I would assume lots of people here in the U.K. who've been making a fair amount of money too, doing things the way they've always been done. Have you encountered any inertia or any problems with that in regards to the fact that now Europe may be competing for the whole package instead of only one part of it?
Inertia, no. I think it's an exciting time. We had a great talk last night from a lady called Emma Wiggs, who's a Paralympic canoeist. And she was talking about high performance, because that's what she does in her industry. And of course, we are all making the parallel with ours. She said a lovely phrase as well. She said, "They're coming to get me. My competitors are always coming to get me." And of course, that's quite an uncomfortable statement to make, especially in a work environment. But actually, isn't there something in that we need to go and get it? And are we ready? I think we are. Are we excited and passionate about that? Are we driven? Absolutely. We know that we're on paper a small player globally in space, but we want to change that. And I think this launch is one way to do that. We're not going to compete across all levels of launch.
Right.
I'm sure you're aware of that. But let's do what we can and do it in a way that supports the UK sector to grow.
Very exciting. One last question for you, and if you have any questions for me, that's certainly fine by me. Recently, it's been in the news a fair amount that Virgin Orbit has been encountering some difficulties on the CAA side of things. That the hope is that this is going to be a one-off kind of thing. That they'll go through these difficulties and hurdles the first time, and then afterwards things will get a lot easier. Do you feel confident that after we get this first launch in the books from Virgin Orbit, that future space operations will be easier once the CAA learns how to do it?
So I think, we're past the point of turning back, right? And as I said, when I went to Cornwall and heard, what Virgin plan to do, the numbers that they're talking, and then you see that we still have these other spaceports in Scotland. We've got companies building rockets. I don't think there's any turning back. Regulation's always a challenge, right? I know Cornwall are really excited. The last update we got yesterday at the conference was Thanksgiving is important to the Virgin team.
It is indeed.
So nothing's going to happen before
and to
Thanksgiving.
people like me, for that matter.
Well, there you go. So we know that it's not happening imminently, but that's not long now to wait. So the CAA, it must be hard, right, to do the first thing,
sure,
and with a lot of eyes watching you and under a great deal of pressure. So we hope that once that's been addressed and Cornwall have proved that they've done it successfully, and fingers crossed that will absolutely happen, then I don't see why we're going to be ready to roll that out across the UK and become a proper player.
That's very encouraging. I'm once again very glad to hear all of that. Is there anything you would like to hear from me? Any feedback or anything that you would have from
I'm
my
guessing,
experiences here?
you have a different perspective. It would be really interesting for those of us. We don't want to be inward looking in the UK. I think it's fair to say we're in a global sector. We want to compete globally. So let's consider how it's been done elsewhere. Learn from the best practice all over the globe. Right? We're still learning. I'm sure we need help. So what are your perspectives on how things are looking and where we could go to learn a little bit more in the sector?
Well, the perspectives are twofold. I'll start off with the bad news. The bad news is in the bad news amongst most spaceflight enthusiasts in the U.S. and given the fact that I haven't seen a whole lot of Americans during my various visits here, it's not being taken very seriously. Right. And of course, the reason is always bigger is better. That's kind of how we do things, isn't it? And so, you guys are launching 300 kilograms, we're launching 100 tons on Starship, and so that's where everybody's focus is, laser focused, Elon Musk, Boca Chica, 100 tons to orbit, et cetera, et cetera. And so all of this kind of falls by the wayside. However, on the other side of the coin, from my perspective, the differences that I see are enormous and important. First of all, in terms of space debris mitigation, your country's investing 100 million pounds over the next 3 years in trying to take care of this very very serious problem.
Yeah.
My country is investing virtually nothing. That's an important difference, and one that really should be publicized more. Not just by you guys, by us too, for that matter. In addition to that, you have your space solar power, the Cassiopeia project.
Yeah.
Such an exciting thing, and the fact that the UK is spearheading that and not the US is a little surprising to me, given how much money we theoretically have to throw at something like that.
Okay.
But instead, the effort is over here. That, I think, is an important distinction as well. And one budget line item in particular that I think is very important is in the field of space safety. 755 million euros being dedicated to that. And this is not about safety in terms of keeping astronauts safe or safe launches or anything like that. Instead, it is, quote, to contribute to the important objective and global effort of protecting Earth, humanity, and assets from hazards originating in space. The continued implementation of the Vigil, Hera, and Adrios Clear Space 1 cornerstone activities, as well as the further advance of the Core and Cream activities. Now, all of these refer to both projects that are dedicated to protecting the Earth from near-Earth objects, asteroids, comets, etc., and on top of that, clearing up space debris. So that is a substantial amount of money going towards this type of project, whereas safety under the NASA budget is dedicated towards safe launches, as I said before, and also safety of astronauts, safe practices, etc. They don't appear to have a separate budget line item for this particular issue, and I think it's very important that any space agency be dedicated towards these kinds of pursuits, and ESA has increased their budget on this line item by 200 million euros. Also, in terms of the green emphasis on propellants, on fuels, on green solutions to get to orbit.
That's really interesting.
So,
We've talked a lot about
differences.
sustainability over the last 2 days. It obviously is something that, as a sector here, we're very passionate about. We've heard from Gravity Lab, who are talking about beeswax and propellant. I know Sky Aurora doing some fantastic things with EcoScene. We've also got Space Scotland and the roadmap that they've developed for greener ways to get into space. I think what I'm hearing from what you're saying actually is that maybe there's an advantage to being smaller, more agile, maybe a little bit more innovative.
Yes.
And perhaps that's where we're going to show our strengths, and we hope. I mean, I'm a bit disappointed that we need to get more eyes on us and perhaps, get some messaging better so that people know that this is very serious here in the UK. This is a big part of what we want to do with our sector. So
for what it's worth, I find what you're doing to be extremely innovative, and honestly, I wouldn't be here speaking so positively of it if I didn't feel that way. I can be very, very harsh in my editorials when it comes to wasteful companies, when it comes to companies that are spending way too much money, not doing things innovatively and working towards sustainability, as you said, those sorts of things. And I see all of those things happening here in Britain and in Europe in general. And that's a very good thing, one that really should be emulated in other developing space programs as time goes on. So I want to do what I can to promote it.
Well, credit perhaps goes a little bit to the agency and ESA, of course. And of course, credit goes not to me, but to the sector itself that's made this conference so fascinating, insightful over the last 2 days. I wouldn't have been able to do this without all the interesting, innovative companies that perhaps we're referring to. So we're delighted to be that place where companies can gather, where the ecosystem can come together. I've heard lots of comments from non-space people who've been here over the last 2 days, which is also important, really, that we do that cross-sectoral piece. And they're really impressed at how friendly. They've used the term nice. I don't see what's wrong with nice. They say what a lovely sector to work in.
Yeah.
So let's keep that up as well. And make sure that perhaps we get our messaging better globally to make sure that people know that whilst we're nice, we're also deadly serious.
Well, thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate that. And once again, I think just this conversation has summed up why I've been here for the last 2.5 months. This has been a very rewarding experience, and I think I'm starting to witness a whole new dimension of spaceflight starting to take shape here in Europe, a whole new model, a new approach of doing things.
Exactly.
So I'm very excited about that.
Well, everyone's welcome to come to the MTC and have a tour. We're very pleased to be a part of the story here in the UK. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
But what about space transportation? And most importantly, what about Europe's contribution to Artemis and what they intend to do to enhance NASA's approach of going to the moon to stay? Is Europe also committed to that? Well, they are indeed, but unfortunately, I've run out of time to describe that in this episode, and we'll be following up with another episode very soon. In the meantime, please like, please subscribe, please check the description for various ways to support my content so I can keep bringing it to you, and as always, stay angry about space!